Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our quick session with Howard Skrill. Before we get started, I would like to read a land acknowledgement, and then we will jump in. The Fairfield University Art Museum is located on the ancestral homelands of the Lenape, Pokanook, Pocasset, and Wappinger peoples, and we pay respect to elders both past and present. We recognize the importance of this land for the indigenous peoples of Connecticut today. Museums have been fundamentally shaped by colonialism and racism and have contributed to the exclusion and exoticization of indigenous peoples through methods of collecting and exhibiting objects of their material culture. Our staff is committed to working to challenge these narratives and make our galleries inclusive spaces in keeping with the university's mission to prepare students to lead their communities with insight, empathy, critical rigor, and a determination to serve and promote justice. Thank you again for joining us. I'm delighted to be here this evening with Howard Skrill, the artist who has created the body of work currently on view in the Fairfield University Art Museum's very first virtual exhibition, Howard Skrill, Monumental Follies. I would like to ask you, our audience, to please ask questions as they arise in the chat section at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to get to them at the end of this talk. So Howard, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carey.
I'm so glad
it's a pleasure to be here.
So glad you're here with me on Zoom. So when I first saw your work and we started talking about this summer exhibition, the world was a very different place. Unfortunately, COVID-19 made it impossible to hang your exhibition in the Bellarmine Hall galleries, but we were able to pivot and create the beautiful virtual exhibition that I'm going to share in just a second. I want to show it to you all just so you can get a sense of Howard's work if you haven't seen it before, just to have a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be talking about. So let me just share my screen. And we will jump in. Oops. On the right is a work by Howard of George Washington, which we will talk about later. But I'm going to take you to the Kunstmatrix exhibition. And just so you know, if you want to explore this on your own after the talk anytime, it's on our museum website on the current exhibitions tab. And that will take you, you click on the Kunstmatrix, click on this, and just enter the exhibition. And you can see it has taken all of Howard's work and displayed it. We have chosen how to display it in this virtual space. And you can go around from work to work and it will zoom in. You can read you can read a exhibition label there. And then you can make your way around the gallery. There's our George Washington. And yeah. Just wanted to give you a little sense of how that worked so that you can explore it at your leisure. Now I'm going to try and get us back to the PowerPoint. There we go. And actually, I think I'll stop sharing at this point and we'll come back to look at the works again in a minute. I did also want to mention we did a great audio tour for the exhibition, another way of exploring it virtually, and Howard contributed some great audio clips talking about each of the works, or a lot of the works. So that's another way to learn more about these when we're done, because we only have about 30 minutes, so we're going to get through as much as we can in that time. So today we are really in a time of rethinking about public monuments, about questioning them. I knew when I saw your work that it would make a wonderful exhibition, especially for a university art museum. And I knew that it would prompt important conversations. I had no idea that we would be in the place we are today in this country, and in fact, in the world. We've all been watching on TV as monuments have been torn down and overturned by protesting citizens around the world. I mean, it's remarkable how this has expanded globally. So you were already hard at work drawing and painting monuments in 2017 when the last really big protests around monuments were occurring with the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, and
Yes.
and then the Teddy Roosevelt statue at the Museum of Natural History in New York. Both of those monuments are in our exhibition. So can you tell us, Howard, what inspired you to first start creating this body of work? And can you please introduce our audiences to the Anna Pierpont series, of which these works are part of, and tell us how it got started.
Okay, it started, I've always been interested in appropriation. When I was first out of undergraduate in the 1980s, I read a magazine called Art Scribe a lot, and a lot of the art of that particular era was influenced by the Reagan administration and their kind of take on reality. So a lot of artists, you know, some like who are very prominent now, like David Soller, Jeff Koons, were appropriating images that already existed. So I had started doing works with commercial illustration and just kind of trying to find their deeper meaning. So I've always been involved with doing representations of things that already exist. I kind of took a hiatus of that, responding to 9/11, but then that petered out, and I decided that I just wanted to draw. So I decided I would just draw public monuments because they're there. So, you know, they were all around. So I started to draw public monuments. So it would be, I'd say, around now going on 7 years ago. Now, around that time, my father passed away. And for the first, I've been living in Brooklyn for about 30 years, about 20 blocks away from Greenwood Cemetery, which is just south of me, which is a beautiful place, a beautiful memorial park. And so I started going there just to wander around and draw the monuments because it's a great repository of monuments. As I was going through Greenwood Cemetery, though, I discovered something which has been very influential for my work, is the fact that the Greenwood Cemetery happens to be the site of the Battle of Brooklyn, which was the largest Revolutionary War battle in the American history. And the keepers of Greenwood at some point built a monument to the Civil War on top of the graves of those who fought in the Revolution, and basically to erase memory of the Revolution. So I started to then move into the direction of memory erasure. You know, how monuments, by being installed, would erase memories of other things. So that became the preoccupation of my work. Back, I think it was about 4 years ago, I made a piece called Erasure, which was a pictorial. I also write, I'm a pictorial essayist, and Anna Pierpont series is also with many pictorial essays, which was about how we bury memory in New York City. So I went around New York City and started to find examples of buried memory. The most prominent example of that was a statue called the Triumph of Civic Virtue over Unrighteousness, which was a statue that was once in City Hall Park, got moved to Queens, and then moved to Greenwood. So I've drawn Civic Virtue, I've drawn its removal, which I believe is in the show, and I've drawn its absence, which is also in the show. So, and so I tracked its passage from, you know, being effaced in Manhattan, being effaced in Queens, and then ending up in Brooklyn. So I just started to, you know, whenever there was in a moment of taking putting a monument somewhere to erase the memory of something else, I made a picture of it. I traced it around, in fact, and then wrote about it as well. There was a bust of Edward Snowden, which was in Fort Greene Park, which is also close to my home. and I drew its movement from the Fort Greene Park. Then I drew its absence from Fort Greene Park, and it popped up again in the Brooklyn Museum. So I follow these monuments around, you know, looking at the removal of monuments. So I never then, of course, the next thing that happened, which was transformative, was the Charlie Hebdo murders. I struck deeply by them, and realized that the questions of monuments or questions of images and how people feel about them is not an academic question, and it's really not in many ways an aesthetic question. It's a question of deep feelings about identity, because what would have motivated these young men to go and murder those cartoonists because of an image? So, you know, artists began to occupy a very contested position in the world. And then this is a little bit of a story, but I think it's a good one. I was sending my work around to various publications to be published, either standing alone or as pictorial essays. And I sent one to a magazine in Charlottesville. It's called Streetlight, and they wanted me to write about and to make pictures about monument removal, because they saw that I had done the civic virtue. And I started a series called I had a lot of pictures of public monument, of basically statues in Greenwood Cemetery, where there's these long columns and figures are on top of the columns, very long and thin ones. Mm-hmm. And I call that the body of work teetering, because it looked like in the political environment, these objects are teetering. And I wanted to go to Charlottesville one weekend, and I called my son, and we're discussing the logistics of going to Charlottesville. And I saw this little blurb that said there's going to be a march. So I postponed it. And I then, after Charlottesville, my collaborator at Streetlight wanted me to completely redo teetering to deal with the aftermath of the protests. In fact, she was directly affected by the protests, because the helicopter that the officers were riding in that crashed in her front yard.
Oh my God.
So yeah, so the highlight. So then the monument started coming down, and I had an exhibition planned about political art at Ramapo College under by curator Sidney Jenkins, and I started to just draw and make pictures of all the removals that took place after Charlottesville. Now, of course, we have the George Floyd murder, and the what was initiated in post Charlottesville is now, it seems to be a tidal wave, and I barely have the bandwidth to make representations of all of those things, because there's so many of them.
Are you trying to keep up with?
Yes.
You are.
Yes.
I mean, it's a staggering number, and and the fact that it's become a global phenomenon is fascinating to me too. But I mean, I think it's great that our protests could be influencing people in Europe and elsewhere in Africa to doing the same kind of work. Are you surprised at all at this moment that how the Black Lives Matter movement has I mean, has really refocused the whole world's attention on monuments and how they are symbols of systemic racism. Does it any
No.
surprise that that the whole world is? I mean, I think it's fabulous. I just it's such an interesting time. I mean, everyone has theories about how this has taken hold now and hadn't before. And there's, you know, we don't need to get into a big political conversation about that. I think there's a lot of factors, but it's been just it's been amazing to watch.
It's a remarkable moment. It's a remarkable moment, but truthfully, Carey, I wasn't surprised what happened in Charlottesville. I anticipated it, because there was a theorist named Robert Muzello who said nothing's as invisible as a public monument. But that only holds true until they're not, until people begin to see them.
Yeah.
And if people begin to see them within a new context, people get very, it's like their eyes are open to something that they previously was invisible to them. So I'm not surprised, because this is what happens when big societal changes happen, is that monuments are sort of the low-hanging fruit of societal transformations. And so it's just a lead indicator, or a lagging indicator. I don't know if it's a lead or lagging indicator, for that matter, of the fact that our societies are suddenly transforming from very deeply held perceptions. But the thing that really boggles my mind is, you have to ask yourself, when did the perceptions start that are now being upended? And I think that the African American community have picked a really good date, 1619. Yep. You know, the first time that that enslaved Africans were brought to this country against their will. So if we are looking at events that we could say 1619 was a kind of singular moment for, that probably give it 50 years before that, you know, you're looking at people responding to situations that are nearly a half a millennia old.
Yeah. So
we are responding to circumstances that are half millennia in the making. So that's the part that really is profoundly interesting to me, is that the events that are being reacted to have a long tail. But the one thing I will also say to you, and also say to the audience, is aren't you surprised at how quickly everything is changing, right? So it's sort of like you have this momentum, this stasis for so long, and then breaks, and now things are in great transformation.
Yeah, and 2017 kind of in a certain way set the stage. You know,
yes.
people were really, but it did. I mean, I do believe that coronavirus has given people the bandwidth, the time to absorb all of this and react.
Yes.
When, you know, everyday life gets in the way of that a lot. But let's keep talking about your work. So we'll shift back to the actual monuments again, and show some more images of those. But let's just talk a little bit about your artistic practice. I'm so glad you mentioned teetering, because I didn't know that that's what that body of work was called, or I'd forgotten. That there's a number of works in the exhibition that are very narrow and tall. Now, it makes perfect sense to me that you chose that format because of the subject matter, but was there any, and teetering is such a wonderful title and explanation. Is there anything else you want to add about working in that format?
You know, just on a purely formal level, you place your object of interest towards the top of the frame, then it becomes like a waterfall downward. And a lot of the monuments I was making pictures of plein air at Greenwood had these very beautiful white base that just columns that flew up into the air, and then on the top would be the subject. It is a fact, though, in a pic, at least from my picture making process, is that I always avoid making the faces of things like horses, for instance, in the TR that was promoting this event, because the minute I make a face, that's all people look at. So all of the rest of the picture is sort of superfluous to the face. So I like putting the faces up top. And when I was thinking about the monument pictures that would go in the show in Ramapo, I just had this mental image of these very long pictures of equestrian statues being removed. And I was surprised at how well it worked out in terms of the pictures, because it started off as just this mental image. Right. So that's and people are there seem to respond to that format. It's extremely dynamic. Admittedly, though, I haven't done too many of them recently. I've made probably one monument, the Peace Memorial in Indiana, which is certainly a work that has proven to be very influential to my work.
You mentioned just in passing, painting en plein air, outdoors. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how, particularly with the earlier works, that was mostly how you were painting, right?
Yeah, I guess a lot of it was when I went to graduate school. Maureen Connor, who is a artist who deals a lot with urban mapping, and I didn't know what to do with urban mapping so much as a concept. The history, histories of the street, histories of place. I'm a fifth generation New Yorker. This is my city, and so I used the process of plein air picture making as a kind of hide and seek exercise, where I'd wander around the city and find those monuments that are tucked away within the physical landscape. And then, of course, you start doing something like that, and you start making connections. You start making a connection between the statue, the Washington Square Arch, knowing historically that about the draft riots in the 1860s, where so many individuals were lynched, and that the city kind of leads memory of that event by this triumphal monument to Washington. So you start to see the city as an exercise in its placement of streets, its placements of public memory are all acts of persuasion. I almost want to use the word. I will use the word propaganda. And so that they're trying to tell you a narrative about ourselves that may not be true, and a lot of times the narrative is achieved through forced forgetting. Another author I really respect, Paul Connaughton, calls it repressive erasure. We take and we erase the things we don't want to see. I mean, I don't recall. I think you may have in the show, and forgive me if you do not, a picture of Sheridan, Paul Sheridan from the Civil War. You may or may not, but I made a picture of Paul Sheridan for Sheridan Square, and Sheridan Square is known as a place for the gay rights movement. But Paul Sheridan was the man who said the only good Indian is a dead Indian. Saying that genocide for that particular group of people, and yet we have a monument to him. Yesterday, I was sitting in this backyard, and I was drawing King Leopold of Belgium, who had blood poured on him. If any man ever needed blood poured on him, it was Leopold of Belgium, for having, consigned, countless number of people living in Congo to the worst possible fate. So it's remarkable what we choose to forget in our processes of remembering.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Before we look at a few more of your images, do you want to just share a little bit about who some of your artistic influences are, people who've inspired?
I specifically mentioned the Peace Memorial, the Peace Monument in Indiana, because I have to give a special shout out to a person that I worked with when I was in graduate school at Queens College, which is Fred Wilson. I believe that while I didn't have an ability to know what to do with the influence of Fred's fantastic practice, this Anya Pierpont Cities kind of gave me ability to channel some of the things that he was doing. That's why, so I really feel a great homage to Fred's work in particular. I also was a bit of tremendous fan of William Kentridge as well, and it's ironic because I was Kentridge said something to the effect that every Jewish artist in the world always deals with the question of the erasing of memory. It's just like that's our subject. You know, since I was born, you know, less than 20 years after the liberation of Auschwitz, you know, the idea of being erased is a subject that is core to my personal and my identity, you know, my identity in total. So, and the other thing that I would like to say is that, you know, I do want to say that toppling of things to get rid of them is not always a happy kind of occurrence. I mean, one could characterize Christian Bach as doing that. So it's taking away what was there before. It's a kind of a blunt and a brutal instrument. Now the cause may be good, you know. I certainly did not hold the French Republicans in the Revolution at fault for pulling down the statues of Louis, but it was not unviolent.
Mm-hmm.
So the actual act of removal is a violent act. It's funny, I made a piece where I was trying to track the earliest version, the earliest moment of effacement of public art that I could come up with, and it was in Exodus, where Moses was commanded by God to pull down monuments of Canaan.
Yeah.
This thing that we've been doing has a very long history, and it's you know what, whoever the actors are, there's very deep human emotions.
I'm going to share my screen again, and we'll look at a few more of your artworks. Howard, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I can't see.
Can I hear?
I can't.
Leave?
Oh, there you are. I just couldn't see your face for a minute.
Am I back? Am I back?
Yep, you're there.
Okay. All right. Awesome.
So as I mentioned earlier, there quite a few specific monuments in the exhibition, which are just pertinent to this historic moment of protest and change. We saw the George Washington at the open. Christopher Columbus is in the show. Teddy Roosevelt, I have a slide of down the road.
Yes, the Eventbrite announcement.
How do you, I mean, I know we've already said that you're not surprised,
Yeah.
Not surprised by this moment happening, but is it still interesting to you to see monuments that you've actually, you know, painted all of a sudden, right in the news again.
Yeah, yes, but the reason why I painted them, the TR, for instance, to Teddy Roosevelt in Natural History,
Right there.
was because of this. Yeah, that one. I done about, this one was a studio work, but I've made about 2 or 3 plein airs of the monument. Also, there's a lot of personal memory that deals with this TR. I lived, I grew up for most of my childhood at 75th between West End and Riverside Drive in the Upper West Side. So this is my haunting ground, visiting this museum. You know, its absence will be striking when it's gone. It really will be striking. And I know that, as with the statue of J. Marion Sims on Fifth Avenue, that something is going to be replacing it. But it's always striking when you see, yeah, there you go. When you see the actual absence itself, it becomes it has a great psychological resonance. Like I said, these are intense acts, and you know, the people who protested in Charlottesville, the reason why I wasn't surprised is because people's tie their identities into monuments, and you know, somebody is gonna not want to see something go, and they're gonna feel it as deeply as those who want to see something go. So you know, Carey, I think that ultimately I try to consider myself a realist.
Yeah.
I'm making realistic pictures. I'm instead of making removals or against removals. I would I like representing their removal. Another thing that Kent Ritz said that I thought was really fascinating is he was describing the social order of South Africa, you know, of apartheid, and he said that the whole system that people lived under was a complete absurdity. So if all you're doing is documenting something that is in and of itself essentially absurd, then you are a realist. He said basically that you're in essence a realist, and that's what I feel. There is these monuments can be so odd that the very act of documenting makes their strangeness emerge, and you know, and then taking them away is also, you know, has seeing the empty stand that the Sims was on is also extraordinarily strange. You know, there's not a lot that we encounter in the world that is so completely absurd and strange that we try to turn our thoughts into bronze or marble, and then have that bronze and marble survive for 150 years, and then all of a sudden somebody sees it 150 years later and goes, what? What are these thinking? Yep.
Do you think that you'll be as interested in painting the new monuments that will be coming? I mean, I'd love for you to do the new Titus Kaphar, what's it called? Winds of War? The one in Richmond, the equestrian statue. Yes, Titus Kaphar did. Have you done that?
I want to go to Richmond so badly. Richmond is like the place where, of all places, I would love to spend a significant amount of time. The changing monumental landscape of Richmond is just fascinating and mind-boggling. You know, I've done research on it. And I haven't done too many pictures of Richmond monuments. They're almost too grand for me. But, I gotta get around to those ones for sure.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to seeing your new works as you
Thank you.
continue this project and continue to explore this important topic. I think that we should see if people have any questions. Before we jump to that, I just wanted to let everyone know that if this is a topic that interests you, Harriet Klee, who is really one of the, she probably wouldn't like to be referred to as an authority, but she has written widely, as you can see, on the topic of public monuments, public sculpture. She was the only art historian on the New York City Mayoral Commission on public monuments, who actually weighed in on the Teddy Roosevelt, right? But she will be doing a talk on October 8th in this, some format very similar to this, I think, still to be determined. But if you check our website, you'll be able to sign up for that. So let's look and see if anyone has any questions for you. There is one. Did anyone protest any of the places in grave sites or places in Greenwood Cemetery? Sorry, I'm just trying to understand this. I think they're asking if anyone protested, if you know of people protesting at Greenwood Cemetery when monuments were moved there from, monuments that were moved to Greenwood Cemetery. Does that make sense? Howard?
Well, yeah, to me.
Yeah, there's just a little lag.
Okay. Greenwood has an interesting history involved. Hello?
Yeah, there's just a little lag. Start over.
Do you hear me?
Yep. Okay. Greenwood is island of lost toys when it comes to nicknames. I bet, but they're the island of toys, civic virtue, and she was supposed to go. I actually where it was going, but it ended up not being in. It was supposed to be placed by his tomb, but it's in. So Greenwood is a section of monuments. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear most of that. I don't know if it was my internet or yours, but
it may be mine.
Okay.
Let me change positions, and maybe that will help. Do you hear me now?
Yeah. So why don't you just try to give us a quick response to the Greenwood?
Yeah. Okay. Basically, there were no real protests in Greenwood, but Greenwood is where most of the monuments that are rejected in New York City seem to end up, like civic virtue. The statue of J. Marion Sims was supposed to be placed by his tomb. He has an obelisk in Greenwood, and the last time I looked, they had to put it there. It's in some kind of shed somewhere. I don't even think Greenwood has the bandwidth to entertain the statue of J. Marion Sims. You know, I don't know if any of the audience knows who J. Marion Sims is, but he was a man who came to prominence as a supporter of enslavement of African American peoples, who performed surgery without the consent of African American slaves. Women became the president of the New York Academy of Medicine, and his representation was standing out across the street in Spanish Harlem for must have been around 100 years before it was finally removed by the order of the commission that Dr. Sine is a part of. So that statue was supposed to go to Greenwood, but and was supposed to go by his gravesite, but I'll check again whether or not it's there or
it'll
not.
be interesting to see what happens to Teddy Roosevelt. You know, there were some suggestions that it go into the museum. You know, they have the exhibition in there about the statue and make it a learning opportunity. But I think that it will be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, it's meant to. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think we have to wrap it up. But did you have a closing thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the museums form a fascinating part of this. I'm not saying your museum necessarily, because it seems as though the museum is the place where these monuments that people reject go. And so, is that the solution to people's feelings about these monuments? Who knows? But thank you, Carey. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Howard. It's really been great. Thank you for your insight and for sharing these beautiful works with us. And hopefully we'll see you on October 8th when Harriet is speaking. You can be a part of the conversation that night.
Oh, I can't. I'm really looking forward to it, Carey. Thank you so much. Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.